My father was a peculiar man. Guarding the frontier with heavy troops, his nature was wildly unconventional. His dream was to lead a rebellion and storm into the capital. On the 15th of every month, he unfailingly wrote to the emperor, asking if he was close to death. I was dumbfounded the first time I saw the letter. Dad, aren't you afraid he'll come to kill us? Holding his pen, my father pondered deeply. Will he come? Then he changed, are you dying yet? To why haven't you died? I dared not speak anymore. Strangely, no matter what outrageous things my father wrote, the emperor never replied. Well, except once. My father found me by the roadside, still a baby. Overjoyed, he wrote to the emperor that he had a daughter. The emperor, who was like a dead man, replied swiftly this time. His letter stated that his crown prince had turned one and it was time to set a marriage alliance, even sending a royal edict. Silent for a moment, my father read the letter over and over, and decided to rebel. Playing with a rattle drum, he teased me in my cradle. What's so good about being a prince? You're my daughter, a princess in the future. After years of preparation, my father rebelled. I was ready for either victory or defeat. But the rebellion was odd. Every city we reached, the emperor sent a trusted minister, urging my father to return. His Majesty asked the general to return. My father refused. Seeing his refusal, the ministers opened the city gates, letting us pass. Honestly, I hadn't really rebelled. Wasn't it supposed to be storming the gates, raining arrows, and shouting, kill, kill, kill? 36 cities, 36 ministers, none could persuade my father. And so, in half a year, we reached the palace. Most of that time was spent traveling. On horseback, my father looked at the palace walls, contemplatively. This journey, not a drop of blood was shed. My father, ever so modest, not a drop of blood shed? We didn't even use weapons. The palace was eerily quiet. When my father barged into the imperial study, the emperor was still reviewing documents, glanced at him, and that was it. My father, known for his temper, cleared his desk. What are you reviewing? I've surrounded you. The emperor looked at him coldly. Without a word, my father demanded the imperial seal and the throne. The emperor slowly stood up, searching for the seal on the shelf. His calm was unsettling. He wrote his abdication edict. My father hesitantly held the seal. The emperor waited, then pointed, stamp here. My father was speechless, but lost his composure. Curious, he threw the seal to me. I quietly stamped it, took the edict. Excitedly, I told my father, Father, you're the emperor now. He was thrilled. Good daughter, what shall we do first? Both of us new to royalty, we looked to the only experienced person there. You should start by picking up the memorials you threw on the floor, the deposed emperor said. Of course, he ended up picking them up. My father, now the rebel, aimed to insult the royalty, to his heart's content. I didn't understand, but that was why he stepped on the emperor's back while he was picking up things. He was good at insulting others. He ordered me to capture the concubines, but there were none. Plan failed. He then ordered me to capture the former crown prince. I found him discussing strategies with his tutor, his posture straight, face handsome. I stood by the window. Are you the crown prince? The emperor summons you. I wasn't lying, my father was the emperor now. He glanced at me, his gaze shifting thoughtfully, asking me to wait a moment. After half an hour, I finally brought him over. My father scolded me for being slow. I defended myself. He hadn't finished his class. We're rebelling, and you wait for him to finish class? Why not wait for him to top the imperial exams? I don't need the imperial exam, the former crown prince calmly replied, his emotional control, just like his father's. My father was infuriated, unable to provoke the response he wanted from the father and son. Then he turned to me, an idea striking him. The deposed emperor is still charming, and the former crown prince, quite handsome. I grant them both to my daughter. Silence fell among the three of us. The deposed emperor, holding a memorial, threw it at my father. Are you sick? My father blocked it with his arm. I'm the emperor now. Dare to throw another? The deposed emperor did just that, throwing 7 or 8 more at him. But it was the former crown prince who was practical. He scrutinized me, apparently seriously considering the situation. Are you married? He asked. Seeing my confusion, he added, I won't be a concubine. You're the crown prince, aren't you ashamed? He pondered, touching his chin. It's a disgrace to my father, not to me. It's time I got married. What's that got to do with me? He brushed his sleeve. Your father promised you to me. And he promised me to your father as well. He frowned, glanced at the deposed emperor, then at me, then let him be the concubine. I won't be. I was speechless. My father was pleased with the former crown prince's compliance, but not with the deposed emperor's defiance. He said, now that I'm emperor, even if I fancy you, you must come to me cleansed. The deposed emperor, silent for a moment. Unless I die, it's impossible. My father exploded. Who are you to talk like an emperor? I'll have you executed right now. He wasn't satisfied with just words, starting to shove the deposed emperor. Unable to match my father physically, the deposed emperor stumbled back, hitting a bookshelf. It sounded painful. I thought, on such a joyous day, why start a fight? I couldn't bear it, kneeling to plead, Father, why give them to me? Just execute them. I seemed to be the only sensible one. We had successfully rebelled, yet the deposed emperor and former crown prince were prime targets. The room went silent. I looked up, encountering varied expressions. My father frowned, lips pursed, as if facing a tough question. The deposed emperor leaned against the bookshelf, lips curved into a smile. Before I could react, I met the former crown prince's resentful gaze. You haven't killed anyone in your rebellion, yet you want to execute me? I hadn't killed anyone, because I had no chance. My father, coming to his senses, cleared his throat. Although we're rebels, we can't be too cruel. He told me to take the former crown prince away. As for the defiant deposed emperor, he'd be strictly guarded. My father was too naive. You can't allow others to sleep soundly by your bed. Arriving hastily, I had no princess's residence, so I stayed in the former crown prince's eastern palace. One night, as I was settling into bed, someone flipped open my covers. It took me half an hour to tuck in those corners. The former crown prince, Li Muqing, sat beside the bed, preparing to sleep. Just as he was about to undress completely, I stopped him. Don't sleep, there's someone in the bed. Li Muqing held a candle, illuminating me. It's you? He leaned closer. Do you plan to assassinate me in bed after trying to execute me during the day? Growing up on the frontier, I hadn't seen anyone as handsome as Li Muqing. His closeness left me tongue-tied, and I inadvertently blew out his candle. Li Muqing was also stunned. Chen Si-jun, what are you planning? I thought for a moment, calmly lying down, staring straight at him. I want to. The candlestick in his hand toppled over. His expression changed, and he covered my face with the blanket. Don't even think about it. Every time I tried to peek out, he quickly covered me back. After several rounds, frustrated, I pinned him down on the bed, my face pressed against the blanket. He might be the crown prince, but he was no match for me. I was thrilled. Chen Si-jun, you can't force me. He struggled beneath me. I pinched his ear. I want you to help me tuck in the blanket. Oh, I was wrapped like a giant cocoon, barely able to turn. Li Muqing, satisfied with his work, then lay beside me with a quilt. He said he had trouble sleeping in new places. Perhaps tired from the rebellion, I fell asleep quickly. The next day, nothing had happened between us, but we were sprawled separately. I moved my head away from his chest, and he withdrew his hand from my waist. We maintained silence, both composed. Even Li Muqing let me wash first. After getting ready, I left the palace calmly, then started running wildly to my father's chamber. Dad, I'm not pure with the former crown prince anymore. What should I do? Help! I frantically knocked on the palace door. It opened, but it was the deposed emperor, clad in a purple robe, his long hair like ink, his expression weary. He looked at me indifferently. What did you do to my son? I was shocked. This, wasn't he supposed to be closely guarded? Leaning on the door, trembling, I asked, what did you do to my father? Is he already dead? The deposed emperor was taken aback. He sighed deeply. You truly are Chen Xianying's daughter. Then he pointed to a side hall at the end of the corridor. My father was leaning against the door, raising an eyebrow at me as if to say, how could your dad die? Resting in the palace overnight, he was dressed in casual clothes, looking quite presentable. I remembered him boasting over drinks that he was a dashing young general in the capital. It seemed somewhat believable now. Biting my lip, I stomped my foot. Dad, Li Muqing hugged my waist. I was Chen Xianying's only daughter, a tyrant on the frontier. No man had ever dared to come close to me. My father poked the deposed emperor. This is the crown prince you raised. What a disgrace. Then he looked at me, miming an uppercut. Then you should have hit him. I sighed, but he did it while I was asleep. The deposed emperor narrowed his eyes, prodding my father's shoulder. Your daughter is no less remarkable. My father, momentarily speechless, finally coughed. Next time, after you wake up, kick him out. Something was off. I didn't understand what he meant. It was the second day of our successful rebellion. My father and I pondered what to do after humiliating the deposed emperor and the former crown prince. After half a cup of tea, he had an epiphany. He stared at the deposed emperor, suddenly slamming the table, pointing at him and declaring emphatically, haven't I, as emperor, not yet ascended the throne? The deposed emperor massaged his temples, exasperatedly saying, just hold court, that's all. My father and I exchanged a knowing look. That's right, time to hold court. Only then did we realize we were 2 whole hours late. The entire court was eagerly waiting to eat. Even seeing my father and me swagger in, some fool asked, oh, is General Chen back? Is the emperor not coming? Let's go out to eat then. My father seemed thoughtful for a moment, and I thought he might explode in anger. But instead, he leaned in and whispered to me, hey, actually, I do fancy eating out at a restaurant. I whispered back, let's hold the court session first, then we can talk about eating. So, under the curious and enthusiastic gaze of everyone, we ascended to our positions. Then my father, with a suave turn, sat down on the dragon throne. An immediate silence fell over the room. My father tried to casually rest his arm on the dragon head of the throne, but missed, causing his body to shake violently, a bit embarrassingly. I coughed, took a deep breath, smiled, and with a slightly trembling yet loud voice proclaimed, long live General Chen Xianying, may our emperor reign for 10,000 years. My father, smiling down at his ministers, said to me without smiling, you don't need to mention the official title now. And why are you doing the eunuch's job? I glanced at the eunuch I'd replaced. He was already thin and bird-like, now nervously darting his eyes around. I offered him a conciliatory smile, declining the feather duster he handed me. The hall remained silent. Until someone's tablet fell to the floor. Seizing the moment, I drew my sword, declaring coldly, what? Do any of you have objections? Damn, I felt so cool. Finally, the sensation of being a rebel leader. Li Muqing, the former crown prince, was the first to step forward, bowing, long live the general. Dressed in his crown prince attire, he looked tall and majestic. The others, unsure, eventually knelt down. My father, hands behind his head, leaned back. Alright, everyone go eat. Being emperor didn't seem so hard after all. But now came the problem. How do we announce my father's ascension to the people? We hadn't fought or killed on our way here. Outside this palace, no one knew we had rebelled. My father suggested, how about flyers or notices? I waved it off, too low class. People might think we're just a makeshift troop. He agreed, you have a point. At that moment, the deposed emperor and Li Muqing were in the hall with us. They sat by the window, engaged in a father-son chess match. One played black, the other white, back and forth. Hearing us, Li Muqing looked up. Father, what if these two fools mess things up? The deposed emperor continued his chess game. Let them be. They're just playing. Ugh, I could still hear them. I stomped over, flipping the chessboard.